The Culture Pop Podcast is brought to you by the law offices of Jacob Emrani.
Accident or injury, call Jacob Emrani. Call Jacob.
Hey, it's Mase. If you or a friend or loved one is injured in an accident, the first person you should call is my friend Jacob. When I did this, Jacob was great. He helped me by talking through the next steps, which really put my mind at ease. When you're injured in an accident, you got to have an expert. That's why you call Jacob, just like I did. Call Jacob, 844-24-JACOB. That's 844-24-JACOB, or visit calljacob.com.
Call Jacob.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Culture Pop Podcast. I'm Steve Mason, along with Sue 𝐒𝐫𝐲𝐬. This is the show where we talk about everything happening in the world of pop culture. Great guest today from the hit series Paradise on Hulu, Krys Marshall, who plays Agent Robinson. Such a cool, dramatic show with all kinds of twists and surprises, and we will dig into all that with Krys. Sue, the Academy Awards this past Sunday. How are you? What did you think of the show?
I thought it was good. I love Conan.
Yeah.
I thought he was funny. It was like his playhouse, basically. He was silly.
Yep.
He wasn't offensive. He was charming. It really surprises me that this is the first time he's hosted the Oscars.
He seemed very comfortable, and you would have thought he would have done it by now. You know what I liked about him? He's clearly a fan of the movies. Like, he's a fan of everybody that is in the Dolby Theater, and it comes through. And you're right, silly is actually really fun and really cool, and that's what he's got going for him. I grew up on Letterman, not necessarily on Conan, but Conan was great, and it reminded me a little bit, a better version of when David Letterman hosted the show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it didn't have as much of a bite or that sarcasm,
Yeah, right. It was just fun and silly. Some of the jokes I totally dug. Well, first of all, we should say the show started off with just an absolutely magnificent performance by Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande. Ariana Grande did Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And then Cynthia Erivo did Home from The Wiz, and then they together did Defying Gravity. Tell you what, those two can sing. They were belting those songs.
Yeah. Well, what I loved about the open of the show is the homage to LA.
Yes.
And in light of the fires, and then showing all the movies that were shot in Los Angeles. I thought that was really cool and really, really classy. And I loved that Conan didn't come out until into the show a little bit.
Right. Yeah, he was a little bit of a surprise appearance there after the big but I'll tell you what, if you want ratings, I think they leaked this out that those two would be singing, and I would imagine that many, many teenage girls tuned in just for the open of the show because it was great. And then Conan had really good stuff. He loved The Brutalist. He says, "I love The Brutalist. I really did. I didn't want it to end, and luckily it didn't." Great joke.
Great joke.
If you haven't seen Conclave, it's logline. A movie about the Catholic Church, but don't worry. He says he wrote that joke specifically, and it is really a great joke. And then my favorite, at the midway point of the ceremony, O'Brien walked out on stage and said, "We're halfway through the show, which means it's time for Kendrick Lamar to come out and call Drake a pedophile. Don't worry, I'm lawyered up." It's like such a great call out for LA in particular. Kendrick, such a huge LA guy, and sort of tapping into the zeitgeist around that rivalry that those two have got going on.
I read something about the writer who actually wrote that joke. I think his name is 𝐊𝐫𝐲𝐬. He writes for Around Midnight as well. And I guess he
Okay.
did write for Conan on his show. He made a bet. He made a $50 bet that joke was going to get a laugh.
Such a good joke. Such a good joke.
The joke that I thought was the funniest was the firefighter.
Agreed.
They were great. I love him. Oh, it was the joke. It was about,
It's
let me
all of
find
our
it. Let me,
all of our hearts go out to those who have lost their homes, including the producers of Joker 2.
it's brilliant.
It's so
Brilliant.
good.
And the
So good.
delivery was amazing.
very dry and straight ahead and just totally nailed it. And Conan even commented on the delivery. He said that's the best delivered joke of the night. It was
Right.
perfect.
I love the Honora joke. Honora's having a good night. It's great. It's great news. 2 wins already. I guess Americans are excited to see someone finally standing up to a powerful Russian.
Hey,
Oh, just smart. But I'll tell you, there was one gag that when it was introduced, I thought it was very funny, but then they never did the callback to it.
okay.
The John Lithgow, if the winners stayed on the stage too long, then they would cut to John Lithgow, who would give them kind of a disapproving face, like a
Disapproving face. Yes.
right? And he was so committed to it,
Yep.
and there were some presenters, I mean, Adrian Brody, I mean, someone wrote a joke
Oh
on
my
social media
God.
that his speech was longer than The Brutalist.
Oh,
Um,
that's amazing. You know, it was the longest Oscar speech in history, at least in modern Oscar history. It's
right.
almost like he did 2 speeches. Then he was so cocky about it. It's like, this is not my first rodeo. It's like, well, screw you.
I know, but that would have been a perfect moment because this wasn't the show where, look, and because he was so arrogant, that would have been a perfect moment to go to John Lithgow. Like,
Yes.
go to him twice,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
That's
know?
very funny bit. Very funny
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Honora with the big sweep, I think it's really cool. $6 million budget, true independent film. I think you and I both thought, and Mark Ellis, when he was here last week, thought that Honora would win. My only hesitation, by the way, was that my mom and my not stepdad Leo hated Honora. Too many F words, too much nudity, too much sex. And I thought, well, maybe those older members of the Academy are going to say, hey, wait a minute. There are 400. Did you know there were 479 fucks in the movie Honora?
Yeah, and then that joke was hysterical.
Oh, the joke was great.
What was that, 3 more? What was it, 3 more than, 3 more than,
Yeah, it,
Sophia Garcon's, publicist
publicist.
after her texts or something,
Yes,
right?
yes. Little fact for you, Honora uses the F word 479 times. That's 3 more than the record set by Carla Sofia Gascon's publicist. You tweeted what? And then he danced around the stage. By the way, I love the fact that he wasn't like Johnny Carson. He just didn't just stand in a spot. Like he was excited to be there, moving around, dancing around. He was great. He was having a blast.
He was like he was on his show. You know how he would always do that stuff with the fake strings, like pulling, like he was some
Yes.
sort of like puppet, and
Yeah.
that's who he is, and he never strayed from that. He was, like you said, he was so in control, he was so confident, and it looked like he was having a really, really great time.
Yeah, yeah, it really did. Sean Baker, first guy ever to win Best Director, Best Screenplay, Best Editor, Best Screenplay, Best Director, and Producer for Best Picture, 4 Academy Awards in one night. Nobody's ever done that before. And good for him. You know, this guy has made movies about people on the margins, whether it's Florida Project or Tangerine, and here he just gets it absolutely right. Still, the shocker of the night. I still I feel terrible for Demi Moore. When it happened, I wasn't thinking hooray for Mikey Madison. I was thinking, oh, Demi Moore right there in the front row in her silver dress. It had to be devastating.
Yeah, it was a shocker, but I have to say that, and I said this on the show with Mark, that it was unfortunate in hindsight. It was unfortunate that that Mikey Madison was up against Demi Moore, who was the sentimental favorite, who won so many awards, although she didn't win the BAFTA. Um, and I thought that Demi Moore is definitely going to win. But someone made a really great point on social media. They were saying that Honora would never have worked and been as great as it was if Mikey Madison wasn't tremendous because she was in the entire movie.
Right, right.
Whereas The Substance, it was really split down the middle between
Yes.
Margaret Qualley. I mean, she had as much screen time as Demi Moore.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Although,
that was a really, really good point.
I was thinking about it. It really is The Substance. I mean, it's almost like Mikey Madison climbed out of Demi Moore's back. to win.
Yeah.
The younger actor wins this particular award, and that part of it is just, it sort of echoes the movie a little bit.
Right, right. And then there were people on social media that were really pissed off that thought that Demi Moore was robbed. And I totally don't think she was robbed. She was not robbed. Robbed is when someone got the award and didn't deserve the award. Mikey
Right.
Madison deserved that
Oh, she
award.
absolutely did.
Everybody in that category deserved the award. All
Yeah.
the performances.
Except for
were-
𝐊𝐵𝐲𝐬𝐡𝐚𝐥𝐥.
Well, her performance was amazing. What
Yes,
she
yes.
did, that's like punishing her like Pete Rose, you know?
Right,
Um,
right.
But so I don't agree with that, with that comment. Because she was amazing.
The one thing I wanted to point out is that obviously 𝐒𝐫𝐲𝐬𝐿 won for Emilia Perez and Kieran Culkin won for A Real Pain. It's a little unfair. They were really co-leads. I mean, you could have made a case that Saldana and Culkin could be in the best actor-actress categories, right? Because they have such significant supporting roles. It's hard to compare Zoe Saldana, who's, again, a co-lead in Emilia Perez, to Isabella Rossellini, who is virtually an extra in Conclave. So it's a lot of times, if you look at the supporting categories, the ones that are co-leads, the ones with the most screen time, often win. Occasionally, there's a Judi Dench. She won for just 8 minutes of work in Shakespeare in Love. But in this case, they were the significant co-leads, and it made sense. Kieran Culkin is just an entertaining guy. That was a really funny speech. Somehow
great.
managed to wangle a fourth kid out of his wife in
That
that
was
speech.
funny.
And I thought
That was
Zoe
great.
Saldana was just lovely and good for her.
Right.
Last
So-
thing, Chalamet. Oh, I was rooting
yeah.
for Tim Chalamet.
Yeah. I actually, I think I only got 5 wrong when we did it
When we did
together.
our picks, yeah.
And then a friend of mine had an Oscar pool, and I changed a few of
Oh
mine.
no.
So I don't know. I don't know if I would have won, because
So you ended up with 5 wrong?
5 wrong with ours, and then with the one I did with my friend, I had got 8 wrong.
See, why would you change?
I know. It's just an idiot.
I ended up with 6 wrong. 6
Yeah.
wrong. And the big one was Best Actress.
That was yeah.
I also
yeah.
had Chalamet to win Best Actor, so it was actually the reverse. Chalamet didn't pull the upset, but Mikey Madison did.
I almost changed it to Chalamet on my friend's pool, and then I went back. So, but
you didn't go
I
to Mikey Madison.
no.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually have a story about Conan that I don't think I ever told you.
Okay.
So when I first moved out here, I moved out here twice. So I first moved out here in the early 80s from New York, obviously to do stand-up. So I get invited to this like comedian's house. I don't know. And I got invited through somebody who was friends with the person whose party it was.
Okay.
And I was newly to LA. I didn't really know anybody. So it was comedians and comedy actors and comedy writers. And as I was leaving, Conan O'Brien was there. This is way before his show. I think he was writing on The Simpsons at the time.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And everybody was, like, oh, God, Conan O'Brien is here. And I had no idea who he was. So as we're leaving, he makes eye contact with me and he says, oh, God, you look so familiar to me. And I said, I'm a stand-up comedian. You might have seen me on Stars, whatever. I was like, whatever I had done. And I hadn't
Yeah.
really done much. And he says, oh, do you work at Ralph's?
That is
And I
so
was like,
funny.
oh my God, you think I'm a cashier at Ralph's? Oh my God, that was such a dagger. Because I
Yeah.
thought, oh, maybe he saw me do my stand-up,
Yeah. Oh, that's a rough joke. I was a joke, I assume. He didn't really think you were working at Ralph's, did he?
No, he did. He thought
Oh my
thought I worked
God.
no, he thought I worked at Ralph's.
Oh, I thought he
That's-
was just doing a gag.
No, he thought that's how he knew me.
Wow.
No, it
Yeah,
was not a
that's-
joke.
Ooh. In my mind, I would convert that to a joke. That's just a good Conan joke. He thought I worked at Ralph's. I have not heard a single complaint about Conan. I don't think, I think he should be the Oscar host next year. And going forward, because I thought he just nailed it, and good for him. It's a really tough job. Normally people get destroyed after they host the Oscars, and he is being celebrated, so good for him. So there are your Academy Awards. I'm gonna get ready for next award season, right? I always I love award season, so we had a blast covering it this year. Hey, don't forget, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, leave us a comment or a review or a show idea. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, subscribe to the show. Big points if you leave us a 5-star rating and a review, and tell a friend about the show. We're always looking for new listeners who are into pop culture. All right, here we go. Our guest today has starred on shows like Criminal Minds, Supergirl, and This Is Us. She plays the first Black female astronaut on For All Mankind, and her latest project is the Hulu hit series Paradise. Krys Marshall joins us. Krys, thank you so much for doing this. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, so we're going to be spoiler-ish, okay? Because we did watch the final episode.
Okay.
And by the time this comes out, the show will be out. But I feel like I don't want to give it all away.
I think that's great. Yeah.
So we'll lay back a little bit. But man, this show is so good. I was so captured by the show from the very beginning. One of the things I thought was interesting is that your character, Agent Marshall,
Agent Robinson.
I'm sorry, Agent Robinson. My first impression was, I kind of don't like her. She comes off as kind of chilly and kind of cold, and I know that's the way it's written. How did you warm up to the character?
I mean, I felt the exact same way that you did. I felt like I didn't like her. I had come off the heels of playing a very well-loved character on For All Mankind for many years, and it was sort of seen as like the heart of the show. So I think I got spoiled as an actor by reading scripts where every single thing she does makes sense, and every choice she makes is one that you would make. So right off the bat, we discover that Robinson is in an adulterous relationship with the president, which I was like, okay, I can't get behind that. And then she's described as everyone says she's sort of like this bitch or whatever. And so, yeah, from the beginning, I didn't love Robinson, but coming on to the show, I loved Dan. I love his work. I love his writing. And I love more than any of that is his sort of work ethic and his total ethos. He's known for being a lovely person to work with. And the little time we spent together on This Is Us, I observed that and I saw how much people enjoyed being there and how much of a community and a family they all had together. So I knew for sure I wanted to work with him again. And then, obviously Sterling is just ridiculously talented and terribly handsome. So that made it easy. But yeah, at the beginning, I didn't love Robinson. I didn't understand her. But I think part of your gig as an actor is to do the best you can to not judge the story and just play it in its totality. So I did that. And then as the episodes started to roll in and I got a chance to see more of who she is and why she operates how she does. And I think episode 7 is a really great example of that.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for audiences to grow and love her the same way that I did.
So I wanted to talk to you about your relationship with the president. And I want to know, did you really, really like love this guy? Like if he were not the president, is this the kind of guy that you would go after?
I mean, he is sort of that lovable idiot kind of guy, from the start. I mean, even when he meets Xavier and he says like, yeah, I want you for the job because you're Black. And I want to stand next to somebody strong and handsome and Black every time I'm up, in front of the press. So, he is from Kentucky and he's in many ways a good old boy and says all the wrong things. So I think on its face, absolutely not. He's not someone that Robinson would have chosen. Something I loved about episode 7, and this is something that we discussed along the way, is I said, I never got to see the inception of this relationship. I only got to see sort of the demise of it and, of course, him dying. Is there a way that we can kind of create something there for this first moment? And so I talked to Dan, I talked to John and Glenn, who are directors, And it's a small moment, but it's in the White House when he's giving his honest speech about what's actually happening with the world ending.
Right.
And we cut to Robinson, and she's got tears in her eyes, and I think she realizes, like, okay, this, sort of Nimrod boy president actually has something in him. So it's a small moment, it's an unscripted moment, but for me, that story was important to decide, like, oh, I see something in this man I hadn't seen before. And for me, that was the beginning of their love affair. Maybe not physically, but sort of the seed was planted in her mind of, like, there's something more that meets the eye. Then on top of all that, for anybody who's ever been in an office place romance or on sets, they call them showmances, in a bunker with 25,000 people, you don't have that many options for people to date. So that probably helped some, and being in close proximity. But, Marsden makes it really easy to fall in love with him because he's just so sweet, so chill, so easy to be around. So no, that part that was easy work.
Well, one other thing I want to say, I thought that maybe the fact that he was the president and you had this access to the president, I mean, it's a very powerful position to be in.
Mhm.
And I thought that that may be some of the attraction as well.
Hmm. I think anybody who's ever seen someone that they're in a relationship, watching them do something that they excel at. So whether your husband's a musician and then you watch him go play a set, or your husband's a writer and you go see him do a stage reading, those moments when you're like, oh my gosh, this old dog still got some tricks in him, And I think that there is something very sexy about seeing someone who has power and a sense of command. And he didn't get it perfect, but President Cal does a really good job of holding it together at the end of days. So I think that is very intoxicating for sure.
So I was describing the show to somebody the other day, and I said, "Well, it's like, you know what it's like? It's like Lost, and that meets House of Cards, and that
Uh-huh.
meets This Is Us, and that's
And the
sort of
Truman Show.
and the Truman Show." Yeah, there is. It's like how do you describe the show?
I mean, just like you did. A girlfriend recently was like, "Oh, I haven't had a chance to see your show yet, but it's a cop show, right?" And I'm like, "A cop show? I That's
Well,
like calling the Mona Lisa a sketch. Like, this is not a cop show, Buster." But, and I guess it is a cop show in some ways. But then, you'd ask me, and I'd say it's almost like Handmaid's Tale, of this sort of like earthly demise because of the ways in which we've destroyed our planet and what happens in the fallout. But I could also see how it is a family story because we're really talking about, family relationships between Xavier and his children. We're watching Cal sort out his relationships with his father and his own son, and how their generational trauma keeps getting passed from man to man to man in that Bradford family. So I know it's so kind of hoity-toity, but it's really hard to put a label on it because it's so many things. And then all of that wrapped into a whodunit political thriller. So, the exciting thing, which you guys have already seen episode 8, is that we will find out who killed the president. And I
yep.
sort of personally hate when a show leaves you dangling for another 12 months until the next season. So, we will find out who killed the president. We will have that answer. And then we will have in season 2 so many more questions needing answers.
I was talking to Steve before we came on the air
Mhm.
that it felt a little bit like Black Mirror
Yeah.
because and that show, I have a really hard time watching that show because it is so creepy
Hmm.
and it is so close to the distant future
Hmm.
that these things could really happen.
Yeah, I mean, we have Stephen Markle is an author who has written a number of books about the end of days, and he's also one of the writers and producers on our show. And so I had a conversation with him and with Dan early on, and I said, "Okay, so help me understand, because I'm not a scientist, right? I'm a girl who went to drama school. So what is this super what is all of this?" And they basically described, I'm going to do my best in layman terms, but that as the Earth continues to rise, we all know that the Earth's core is hot magma, and that hot magma is being held down by, the tops of volcanoes. And so some of the largest volcanoes are, in Antarctica that are being capped by polar caps, literal polar caps. So if you think about shaking up a bottle of champagne, and then eventually you just start to kind of nudge that cork, and then vamoose. Now we have trillions of gallons of what was once ice turned into liquid, and that rises the sea very quickly, and that water becomes an enormous tsunami. So just wrapping my mind around how we're not talking about an asteroid, we're not talking about, some other thing that feels like kind of super villain-esque Mad Max sort of thing. We're talking about what's actually happening right now, which is Earth's temperatures rising. Those are facts. So, and making the show, we shot last year from the spring through the summer. And, understanding all of this, talking to Dan and Stephen and understanding how the science of our world is reflective of real science, it still felt very distant. And then as we approach our season premiere, Los Angeles catches fire.
Yeah.
Um, and, we live in Topanga and we were evacuated from our home for 12 days. The fire line was about a quarter mile from our house. So, a little over 1,000 yards. And it never dawned on me how real this all is. Much like you mentioned with Black Mirror, this is not just hocus pocus TV show. This is real life. So of course we're making a TV show. We're not, curing cancer. But I do think the ways in which we can reflect to the world how our real behavior really does affect us on the ground, I think that's important. I think those conversations are important.
So Dan Fogelman is such a great writer. Obviously, This Is Us. And one of the things I love about Paradise is sort of the layers he builds into characters. Like, for example, the scenes between Sterling K. Brown and the great Glenn Turman.
Yeah. Oh,
Xavier and his
gosh.
father, they are
Mhm.
such great scenes. And it builds this sort of extra layer with Xavier's character. I think he does that, as Fogelman does that so well.
Yeah, yeah. You know, that's an excellent observation because what you're talking about is the why. It's something that we discuss in acting all the time. So whether you're playing Glinda the Good Witch or you're playing Machiavelli, everybody has to have a strong why because we're all living in a world in which we are the protagonist. We're the good guy. So even if someone's doing something absolutely horrible, you're telling the story of a serial killer, you still have to have a really strong intrinsic why. And so what I think is brilliant about the story of Xavier and his father is that we're observing that with his own father, the most important person in his life, essentially, he is going to betray his father, it would look like, because his allegiance to honor, truth, and honesty is so paramount. So we're watching his father, who has been diagnosed with Parkinson's. His health is declining, but his pride won't let him retire from, being an airman, from being an airline pilot. And so we're seeing how there could not be a more difficult decision for Xavier to make. Does he align with his father and allow him to essentially put folks in danger? Or does he do what he knows is right and potentially end the relationship with the man who made him? If it were me, Krys, I'd keep my mom's secret. I mean, I guess I just don't have a strong enough moral compass. So Dan doesn't just say to the audience, "Hey, I'm Xavier. I'm a good guy." No, he shows you through his actions, through those hard tests, those real moments of truth, crisis of faith. Who is this man? So that we see that no matter what, he's going to do the right thing, even if it feels like a betrayal to the people that he loves the most. So that's an amazing observation about that episode. And, we continue to see that throughout the different characters. We see it with Julianne's character, Sinatra, who is known as the villain in our world. But we see early on that, losing her son was a major fissure into who she was, an enormous fracture, as I would imagine any person would be if they lost a child. And so we see that her allegiance to protecting her child, the one that she has remaining, is so important that she will actually kill a lot of people because she wants to make sure that the kid she has remaining stays safe.
Yeah.
So you're looking at a villain and saying, that's a bad guy. No, that's a mother who loves her daughter. We're
Yeah.
looking at a person who says, wow, he wants the president dead. Nope. We're looking at a man who loves his wife.
Hmm.
So what you're observing about Fogelman and the way in which he writes, it's hard to hate anybody. A lot of people online are like, I hate Sinatra, kill her. I don't. I have so much empathy for her because I'm a mom and I know what it's like to do anything in your power to protect your kid.
Yeah, and I
Maybe not
love
kill, but I don't
Yeah.
know it. I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah,
I
yeah,
haven't been
yeah.
asked to yet.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the true test, isn't it,
Yeah.
But I love how it paralleled with Cal's relationship with his father who has
Mhm.
dementia,
Mhm.
I mean, that's the complexities of these father-son relationships were
Yeah.
so potent.
Yeah. And the ways in which, you know, Cal is continuing to repeat patterns. I thought it was really interesting in seeing, I think it's episode 5. It's the romantic episode, and that's the episode that James and I have some scenes in bed, and we get to see the true nuance in that relationship, that it's not just, sexual, but these are two people who really understand each other, love each other, have real conversations, classified conversations. And then we're seeing that his son Jeremy is doing the same thing with Presley, Xavier's wife. But the two of them are having this close, and they're teenagers, but there's an understanding there, and she shares about her mom and the hope that maybe my mom is still alive out there. And then we even talk to Cal's dad, and he talks about how his affair or his relationship with Cal's mom was, you know, um, disproved by his family, and they didn't like it, and they had to get married in secret. So it's really beautiful how the patterns that you grew up with, you have to actively address and face to do them differently with your own children.
Yeah. Hey, we'll circle back around to Paradise, but I wanted to ask a couple of other things. I'm
Yeah.
curious, as you were a kid growing up in Atlanta,
Mhm.
what actors did you look at and say, "Wow, that's what I wanna do. That's who I wanna be"?
Yeah. Wow. That's a great question. I, growing up, loved movies like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Oh, great.
I really love when a comedic actor like Jim Carrey can play something that is really multifaceted and strange. I was always drawn to art house weird movies like Requiem for a Dream and Amelie. So yeah, I think that there's not any one particular movie that or any one particular actor that I was drawn to, and more sort of a style of movies that felt very raw, that felt like slices of life. Um, you know, what I love about Paradise is that it's a big budget studio production for a major network, but there still is that edge, that strangeness, both in the language and the performances that feel very much like a series of 8, you know, independent films.
Yeah.
So you had a long, long run on a show that I didn't see a lot of for All Mankind, and I've got many years on you, so it's about space exploration. When I was growing up, the space program was huge, and there was
Mhm.
like anytime anything was going on, everyone that I knew was glued to their TV to watch. I mean, I was around when the man landed on the moon, and so when you got this part, um, when when you were growing up or during your life, um, how much have you paid attention to space exploration? Has it been something in your life
I
that you
mean,
paid?
sadly, none at all. Yeah, none at all. Before joining For All Mankind, I had this sort of like boilerplate knowledge that every kid has when they grow up in America, which is Neil Armstrong and maybe a little dash of Mae Jemison. And I knew that the Challenger exploded, but that was it. I think the Challenger explosion was an excellent example of what happens when um, public appearance affects, scientific exploration. That moment was, I would imagine, very devastating for the folks who were around and who were in school. And, I remember hearing stories of school kids all sitting around a television watching it explode together. So after that, of course, NASA continued to explore, but it lost a lot of funding. It lost a lot of public support. And so when I was growing up in the 90s, I really was not exposed much at all to NASA. So when I got the part in For All Mankind, I had a lot of catching up to do. And what I loved about that show is that because in our world, the US beat the USSR to the moon, there's so many things that didn't happen. The Challenger never exploded, and Clinton never became president. There's just so many things that happened in our alternate universe that changed, the trajectory of history. But I think, it feels like it's having a return to public conversation, both with SpaceX and, the new conversations around electronic vehicles and the state of California wanting to move to all vehicles by 2030. So it makes me very happy that that technology is at the forefront of the conversation again, which it wasn't for, the 90s and the early 2000s.
You mentioned alternative universe, or this idea, kind of the sliding doors concept, right? Where it just works or breaks a certain way. So I go back and I think about my career, and I was came down to just me and John Henson for Talk Soup years ago. Talk
Oh,
Soup, I
yeah,
think,
I
happened.
do remember Talk Soup. I love that show.
And I always wonder what would have happened had I gotten that job. And with you, I was reading that you were in talks or in conversation for 12 Years a Slave, the
Oh,
Lupita Nyong'o role. Do you wonder, like, what in sliding doors way, what world would have been like, what your world would have been like had you booked that job?
there first of all, that role belongs to Lupita Nyong'o. She was absolutely perfect for it. And I think it's an exaggeration that I was in talks for it. I auditioned along with dozens of other girls.
Okay,
Let's just
okay.
so let's not get ahead of ourselves, Steve. But of course, to get to work with Steve McQueen and these incredible actors. I mean, that's the crazy thing about being an actor, like you said about Talk Soup. Each time an audition comes in and you start to get close on it, your brain begins to whirl about life in Vancouver or in New Orleans. And now you're doing research about best restaurants for breakfast in New Orleans because you're just like, you're down that path. So, I mean, that of course is one of them. That was many years ago, but there have been so many, and then I think about For All Mankind was the exact opposite direction. I actually went in to that casting office for a totally different show, and they had already cast a girl for Danielle Poole for All Mankind. Um, the job was, I think, 3 days away, maybe 4 days away from shooting, and I went into Junie and Libby's office for a completely different show, and as I was walking out of the office, heading to the parking lot, the assistant ran out after me and said, "Do you have a second? Can you read really quickly this show about NASA?" And I
Hmm.
was like, "NASA? Are you kidding me?" It's like, "Can you quickly do this brain surgery?" Like, "No, like, I don't have 10 minutes to read about NASA, but let me give it a whirl." So I sat outside and I read the audition material, came back in 10 minutes later and did the audition, and then found out that evening, maybe 4 hours later, that they wanted to offer me the role. I, of course, had no idea. They'd already hired a girl and already done the fitting and planned the job for her, but I think somewhere along the way, casting knew that they had a girl that was close, but they didn't have the girl. So back to your sliding doors conversation, I think that for me was the major sliding doors where if I had not gone into that audition, if I had made a tape at home instead of going in person, if they had not seen the girl, liked her, but not liked her enough. Like, I think about a million iterations of how that could have played out, how casting could have let the girl who had the job keep the job. But ultimately, just like 12 Years a Slave was meant for Lupita, Danielle Poole was meant for me. That was my job. So I have to have faith that things work out the way that they were meant to. And I'm glad you didn't do Talk Soup. Who knows? You could have left the studio the next day and been hit by a bus. Like,
That
you're
is
right where you
absolutely
should
true.
be.
Yeah, there's
That's
Yeah,
true.
also a theory, what is it called? The invisible string theory. Do you know that one?
exactly.
Uh,
Exactly. That if you had done Talk Soup, we would be living in hot magma right now.
yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly. Well, you've lived this life. My partner is an actor. So he's doing the self tapes, he's doing all that stuff.
Well,
You
God
mentioned,
bless you to have to live with somebody who does all this.
yeah, that's right. I end up, I'm the reader, the designated reader in
Mhm.
the house, so I read every day. What's that life like? The life you were kind of describing, the auditions and the booking jobs and the almost getting it and the not getting it. What talk about that? Sort of the coming up
Oh,
in the business.
it's exhausting. It is exhausting, and I remember being in drama school, and our dean saying to us at freshman orientation, "If you can do anything else, and be happy doing it, you should leave now and go do that."
Hmm.
And I was like, "Okay, whatever." And then years later, I realized exactly what he meant. I mean, there are times when I was living in New York, just finished school and had so little money where I was like, I can either take a taxi home or I can have money for dinner. So those are
Mm,
my options. I can either
yeah.
get home or get dinner and walk 100 and something blocks. So, that life, there is no guarantee. There's no certainty that this will ever come together for you. There's no certainty that you may just essentially waste your life or feel like you've wasted your life trying for something that won't ever be yours. But for me, the highs were high and the purpose was there. I really felt driven by it. So now that I get to sit down with folks like you guys and talk about shows that I've done, this is the icing on top. But for me, the real joy comes in when I'm sitting in the makeup chair or I'm sitting in the rehearsal space and highlighting my lines, and me and the other actors, we're talking shit, we're telling jokes from the weekend, standing outside smoking a cigarette, and like these moments I just feel like instant community with these
Hmm.
people who you would never get to know under any other circumstance. I would never be in bed with James Marsden under any other circumstance, but because of this. And so it's so much fun. It feels like you're in the circus. So the fun days in the circus are when you put up the tent, and the bad days in the circus are when you have to pack up and head to the next city. But it feels like it's worth it. And I think if there are actors and artists who are listening to my voice right now, I would just say, hang in there, baby. Hang in there, because there have been so many nights where my mom has had to, call me and just been like, "I can't understand you. You have to stop crying." And I'm like,
Mm.
"I can't believe I didn't get it." It's just so inconsolable.
Sure.
So yeah, but we need the support of folks like you for your partner, who's there and holding you up. God bless you guys.
I wanted to know, if you're the type of actor who you get wind that there's a part that you want so badly,
Mhm.
um, are you a fighter? Do you call up your agent and say, "You gotta get me in
Hell
for this?"
yeah, I'm a fighter. You know I'm a fighter, girl.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I feel like, your agents get 10% because they're only responsible for 10%.
Yeah.
So I'm on the hook for the other 90. I'm on the hook for reading the trades and making sure I know what's going on. I'm making sure that if Iñárritu or Spielberg or Aronofsky, if they're making something and I see it in Variety and I like the idea or the world, or I see a world where I could be in it, even if it's Spearman #4, I'm reaching out to my team and saying, "This is somebody I want to spend days with. This is somebody I want to learn from." I'm also the sort of person who, when we have downtime, I'm usually not in my trailer. I like to hang out on set and talk to our
Mm.
sound designers and ask them like, "Okay, so when you're mixing, like, tell me what you're listening for," or stand behind Video Village and see like, not to be intrusive, but they're setting up the shot and I see that they've decided to move a lamp. I wonder why they're moving that lamp. I'm like a glutton for what it is that we do. So when something comes along, and I feel like I can be in that world or learn from those folks, I'm fighting. And I'm also a firm believer that there is enough for all of us. So if something comes around to my desk and I've read for it and they decide they're going to pass on me, but I know I have a girlfriend who is perfect for it, I'm going to email it to her and I'm like,
Mm.
"Girl, I went in for this. It's not mine, but it might be yours. Can you talk to your people and see if you can get in for this?"
Yeah.
Because if it's not going to be for me, I want my sister friend to get it because I want us all to rise together.
So you brought up that you have this thirst for knowledge of all the aspects of doing a show or a movie. when you finally see the finished product of months and months of working on something, and you hear the music and you see the choices that the editors have made, what's your take? Like the music in this show,
Oh, it's
Beautiful.
great.
Beautiful.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
So what's your like your initial reaction where you're like, oh my god, that like, wow, they went there, you know?
Oh, I feel like I'm still a kid at heart where I'm shocked that it works. Because when you're at work, you're doing the best you can to, tell the truth of this world. But then you guys are also, I mean, if anybody watches the Paradise Instagram page, you'll see that we have a lot of fun and we're very silly. So it's shocking to know that like this thing that we made, that when you're doing it, it feels silly and you're hanging out and you're telling stories. And this one's up late, he went out for drinks. This one's up early with the baby. Like, then you see it and you're like, wow, this looks like a real TV show.
Yeah.
Like I'm
Yeah.
always so shocked that it works. One thing I love about Dan is that he is very much a collaborator. And I know people use that term easily and they throw it around, but he's a true collaborator. So when we read the scripts, it's an open dialogue. I'm welcome to have conversations where I say, I don't love this scene the way that it ends, or can we change this line to that? So I'm in the kitchen, as they say, I'm in the kitchen on that. And then when we're on set, like I mentioned, I'm observing, I'm talking, we're having conversations about costume. Is she in a suit or is she in a skirt? Is her hair up? Is her hair down? So you're in the minutia on that. And then once we've shot the episodes, he allows us to come in and take a look at the director's cuts. So they're super raw. There's no
Oh, wow.
music. There's no fancy VFX. It's just the raw material of what we shot on the day put together in, sometimes it's like 61 minutes instead of 58 minutes. So I'm able to see it as it goes along, and then finally I'm doing ADR, where I'm revoicing things that got muffled or lines that got cut off. And then finally, we get to see it with the edit with the music. So it's less of a surprise party and more like a hosting a party where
Mm.
you were there with the caterers and set up the balloons and the flowers. And so when people come in, they go, "Oh my God, surprise!" And it's a surprise for the person being celebrated, but for you, you've been planning this for years.
Yeah.
So I just love it. I just love it so much.
Yeah,
You
because
know,
I worked in I was gonna say that I worked in post and mostly for reality shows, and I worked on the Osbournes, and
Mm,
and the fact that we had the freedom to do whatever we wanted, we would do things that were so outrageous that I could not wait for people, like, especially our executive producers and the network, I could not wait for them to see what we did,
mhm.
slave to the footage that we shot because it wasn't scripted. So that's why I was curious, you on the other end, your reaction, but that for me was the greatest feeling in the world.
Oh, it's so great. And then there's the sort of secondary part of it where you've made the thing and it streams or you put it on air, and then to see the audience response to it, and like back in the Osbournes to see if an episode goes viral or a clip is talked about on Talk Soup. Um, those moments are really cool because it's fun to see like what resonates with folks. What are people excited about? Episode 7 was one of those episodes. When we made it,
oh
we knew
yeah.
we were doing something special. But in the days since the episodes aired, just seeing the overwhelmingly positive response from people has been like mind blowing.
So one of the things, it just occurred to me, one of the things I find fascinating about Paradise is that you don't think of a president having a personal relationship with his Secret Service guy. You don't think like you wonder like is Trump like buddies with somebody that's a Secret Service guy? Do they have a personal relationship? And all of a sudden you see this and you realize there's this thing that goes on, a relationship between a president and his Secret Service guys that we never see and never know about. And it dawned on me as I was watching this show.
I mean, I feel like I'm married to you because my husband said that exact same thing last night. Because he said, typically in end of the world stories, we are focused on either the person with all the power, so usually the president, and we tell the story from his perspective, or we tell the story from the perspective of like, the everyman who goes on this journey. But when you think about every single person who is in the vicinity of the president, they are as close as possible to power and yet the most disempowered people. So whether it's a custodian or it's the president's secretary who in episode 7 is like, I have been with you since the early days of your campaign.
Yep.
I've watched your child grow up. You've watched my child grow up. Like, you know that person so intimately, and yet your proximity to power still affords you absolute powerlessness.
Yeah.
You're not one of the ones that are saved. You're at his mercy. So I think it's a really beautiful storytelling decision on Dan's part to have our world from the vantage point of essentially a fly on the wall,
Mhm.
someone who's watching it all go down. And if you look at the scripted dialogue for Xavier, there are entire episodes where he says very little because he's just watching. And thankfully, Sterling is so captivating and has such an expressive face. So he's able to tell so much. But there are huge swaths of our story where he's the focus and he's just watching the world go down around him.
Yeah. I mean, I love when the curtain is pulled on a life that you're not privy to.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I always wondered, and I used to joke about this before that show, The Pope, came out, where we got to see a young Pope.
Sure.
I used to think about the conventional Pope and think when the cameras aren't on him and he's just home in the Vatican by himself, does
Right.
he take off the robe and his cap
In
and
Bermuda shorts.
yes, you wear Bermuda shorts and Birkenstocks, you know? Like, how human is this guy when
I
nobody's
mean, it's
looking?
great. It's great. And I think the same thing. Like, was Mother Teresa born old? You know, like, was she ever a
Right.
girl? Like, yeah, no, she's born 71. I mean, she had to have been. But yeah, exactly. These are real people, every single person who you see. And there's that moment in episode 7 that is just so genius where they're coming down the tunnel in the midst of the evacuation, and Xavier stops to take off his life vest to put it on the president. That moment is what we're talking about. That man whose allegiance to honor and duty is so intense, so fervent, that he will literally take off his life vest to put it on the president, knowing that there is live fire. Couldn't be me.
Yeah. Right. Right. You know, you mentioned episode 7, and there's a moment in episode 7 that just breaks my heart. Just breaks
Which
my heart.
one?
It is that moment where he notices the janitor or the custodian dusting and cleaning and not realizing that this is it. And that it triggers Cal to go and give that speech, right?
Mhm, mhm.
But so subtle.
We were all together as because you could see there was probably 200 background actors and another 20 actors who all had speaking roles. And so that day, it was hard not to let your emotions run away with you because each time, if you rewatch the episode, a lot of it is shot without cuts. So
Hmm.
it's just us coming down the hallway, and then Xavier catches me, and it's this intense walk and talk going, going, going. And then someone hands something, and someone goes another way, and we head to the elevator. Like, it's all on one reel. And so each time we would go back to one and shoot the scene again, it's like adrenaline goes up, 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 up. And then it's on Marsden to catch the eye of this lovely older actor who just brought so much levity and gravity to that role as he just dutifully shined tabletops and dusted as the day went on. And that actor was so present that it drew everyone's attention each time we'd come back to that moment. And it was difficult not to get carried away and
Yeah.
become emotional because as he would talk about his granddaughter and seeing her for her birthday the next day, we are in the story playing this world, but we're also real people who also have our own children and just thinking
Mhm.
like, what would it be like for me if tomorrow didn't ever come? So I love that moment. And there's another brief moment later where he asks for a cup of coffee, and then the White House chef
Yeah.
comes in and brings the coffee and says, "It's been an honor to serve you, Mr. President." But in the White House, there are dozens, probably hundreds of people who have never left. They have been there for 8 or 9 administrations. They've been
Yeah.
in the White House working for 40 years. This is the only life they've ever known. And the presidents do come and go, but this staff has been there. This is their home.
You know, the last thing for you here, I am wondering, as I was watching the episode, last night. I was watching the final episode. I wondered to myself, is there an iPad somewhere where people in power know that something is coming? Have you ever been to
The answer
Denver
is yes.
Yeah, have you ever been to the Denver airport?
Uh-huh.
Okay, it's freaky, right? There's
Yeah.
freaky art, and there's a horse with red eyes when you first come into the airport, and there are reports that there is an underground city there. That's always
believe
the
it.
speculation, and it just makes me fearful that there is something that they know about that we don't and will be sprung on us at the last minute.
I mean, we could be here for another hour talking about all my conspiracy theories, but, I think if you were the richest man on earth, worth billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars, the only thing that is precious is your life.
Mhm.
And we see that in the stories of these billionaires who are trying to, there's that term for like cheat genetics by basically becoming younger through, whatever,
Yeah,
IV
right.
fluids and all those sort of things, genetic jumping or
Juice.
whatever it's called.
Genetic juice.
Exactly, genetic juicing. But if you have unlimited resources, then your only true judge, jury, and executioner is time. No one
Yeah.
can beat time. So if there is a way to prolong life on Earth, I think they're doing it. There's no way that the billionaires that we all know by name don't have some escape route that the rest of us don't have. Of course they do.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
how interesting that this story was in Colorado. This is where
Mhm.
this is where they
Yes.
went, and
And
you're
it's not
talking
by
about this
chance.
airport.
Yeah, I mean, our writers chose that because it's high elevation and it's in the center of the country and, it's, all of those things. But my question for you guys is if the world were going to end and go from 8 billion to 25,000, would you want to live or would you rather just be wiped out in a tsunami?
I would rather live.
Really?
I would take a shot at that little world in a
Mhm.
mountain in Colorado. I would take a shot at it.
But knowing
Um
that everyone you love, other than maybe just one person, right? Because you only
Okay.
Well,
get
that
25,000
depends.
folks, right?
Yeah,
So
you're right.
everybody can't bring everybody, and you can't
You're
bring the
right.
dog.
Yeah, take me out. Just take
Yeah,
me out
that
at
would
that
be
point.
when you just mentioned the dog. If I can't live in a
Bring the
world
dog.
without my dog, I don't wanna be here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That one guy snuck in his dog.
he
That one
did.
guy.
Yeah, he
He
Yeah.
did. Yeah,
did.
right.
I would be
Right.
Yeah.
that guy with 3 dogs trying to sneak in.
And then
Um
they'd shut the gates on you. I
Right.
mean,
Exactly.
yeah, I don't for
So
me,
so
I don't know. I mean, if it were my kid and my husband, but I couldn't bring my mom, my sister, my niece and nephew, my aunties, like, I don't know. It's a question mark. Part of me
Yeah,
feels
it
like it'd be
is.
better to just go quick.
Yep.
Just let the
Yep.
wave take me.
Yep.
so Steve, you said you're 3 dogs. So would you push out like a cousin so you can have 3
I
dogs?
would. You know what? I don't like my cousins. So, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Hey, Krys, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for
Thank
doing it.
you.
All episodes, by the time this airs, all episodes of Paradise will be streaming. Everything's on Hulu. We understand there's a second season. Congratulations
Yeah,
on that.
thank
And lots
you.
of questions to be answered in season
I'll
number
come
2.
back.
Awesome. We
Yes.
would love to have you back. Please come back and talk about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. This was great.
There you have it. Krys Marshall joined us. That is such a good show. It really is my favorite show in a long, long time.
Yeah, I mean, and it's off the beaten track, you know? I mean, I haven't seen anything like it, and that's
No,
what I loved about it.
and it's so twisty. Every time I think I've got it nailed, turns out I wasn't even close. So it's a really, really smart show. Strongly recommend Hulu's Paradise. Now, we covered the Oscars, we covered Paradise. I think it's been a great episode. Don't forget, if you are watching the show, listening to the show, follow us on YouTube. And anytime you like or leave a comment, it definitely helps the show in the algorithm department. Definitely follow us on Spotify and Apple. 5-star rating and a review we appreciate. And by the way, if you know anybody that's watching Paradise, this is a great conversation to pass along to them. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for listening. We will see you next time on the Culture Pop Podcast.